Okay, so to give you some backstory, I bought this DeWalt air compressor back in February, so less than a year ago. Filled it as recommended to the center of the sight glass, and after about 20 minutes of operation, the pump seized up. So I got into contact with the manufacturer. Originally contacted DeWalt, but of course this was a product that was not manufactured by DeWalt. It was actually branded DeWalt by another company. So once I finally got into contact with the correct people at the actual manufacturer, they sent me this pump. It took about 2 months to get it. I'm assuming it probably came directly from China. Finally got it installed. Looks like the new one's working, but I did want to do an autopsy on the old pump just to see what failed. I figured it was probably some kind of bearing surface, or perhaps the piston was seized in the bore of the compressor. So got everything torn down yesterday, and it looks like the cylinder bores are actually honed and in quite good condition, what you'd expect for a brand new unit. Everything came apart pretty easily. Once I got to the crankshaft, I realized that the piston closest to the input shaft on the crank was seized. So these are a cast aluminum one-piece connecting rod with no kind of bearing material in there as far as a liner goes. There's no babbitt or anything. It's actually using the aluminum casting, which rides directly on the crank journal. And it uses a dip lubrication system. The lubricant was to the center of the sight glass. I had to take a little bit of it out so that it didn't leak out everywhere. But I actually had to fracture the connecting rod in 2 spots to be able to get everything apart to take a look and to get it freed up. You can see there's some pretty good galling on both the crank journal and the connecting rod's inner surface as it sort of welded to the crank. There was a Chinese Pier 6206 bearing on the input shaft side that was sitting inside of this housing with a low cost, looks like maybe an NOK seal, lip seal. Same bearing on the opposite side. This one's kind of a loose fit on that side, a slip fit. The other one was actually a slip fit as well, and it was they used some kind of bearing retaining compound to keep it onto the crankshaft on the inner race. So I actually had to heat up the shaft a little bit in front of it in order to melt that compound and pull it off with a bearing puller. Yeah, once I got everything apart, like I said, you can't get, without taking that back bearing off and getting everything out of the way, you can't pull this crankshaft out. So I had to actually split the old or the seized connecting rod in order to get everything apart. And you can't even really service this practically. You'd have to get in here and get like a drift or something and punch that other bearing off of the crankshaft in order to get everything apart and try to fix it. So this is pretty much a one and done consumable part. It's not user serviceable from what I can tell. I guess the moral of the story is there's some pretty inconsistent quality control with perhaps the fit or machining on these parts, and don't be surprised if something fails pretty quickly from the factory. I definitely think if you're gonna get an air compressor, I would save the money, buy something a little bit more expensive from Quincy or Ingersoll Rand, because these DeWalts are just not made to last. Something else to note, a lot of the higher quality air compressors will have a motor that runs at synchronous speed around 1750. This one is 3450, so it's actually running twice the speed, which makes the pump really loud when you actually turn it on. And I can show that real quick, but it makes it hard to work around the compressor while it's running. So just save the money, either get a used high quality US made air compressor off a marketplace, or save up and just buy a better brand. But here's an example of how much noise it makes when it's operating. And you can see that it almost didn't have enough startup torque to even turn the pump. And there's currently no pressure in the tank. So I won't be surprised if this thing fails again pretty quickly. And then I'll probably have to spend more money on an actual high quality air compressor. But just wanted to give you a little bit of insight and make sure that no one else makes the same mistake that I did.